It's 11:30 in Pittsburgh, and this morning an interesting chat with NBC diplomatic correspondent Richard Valeriani, all about a book on his travels with Henry Kissinger. And you're going to meet a delightful woman who runs a camp for overweight children, so if you have any pudgy kids in your house, stay tuned. All this and more coming up on Good Day Pittsburgh.
Good morning and welcome to Good Day Pittsburgh with Eleanor Schano White and Tom Peterson with news.
Good morning, everyone. This is Thursday, May 24th. That weatherman has told us a little fib again. He said rain. Last time I looked outside, the sun was shining. However, I'm afraid for the next couple of days, sunshine is going to be as scarce as gasoline around here. It was a bad accident this morning on the Parkway West. Fortunately, no fatalities, but took me about 2 hours to get to work. Tom Peterson has all the details now with his mid-morning news update. Good morning, Tom.
Good morning, Eleanor. Good morning, everyone. A 30-year-old Carnegie woman, Mary Trageser, is in guarded condition at Mercy Hospital at this hour following a multiple vehicle accident on the Parkway West at Green Tree. State police said a tractor-trailer lost its brakes coming down the hill, smashed a Volkswagen, which in turn hit another truck. The first rig crushed the VW, trapping the Trageser woman inside for about an hour. The wreckage has since been cleared. 10 other vehicles were involved in that mishap. Only minor injuries in a Port Authority transit bus accident this morning on Brownsville Road in Mount Oliver. 7 persons were treated for relatively minor injuries after the bus struck 2 parked cars and a pole and then plowed through a plate glass window. The driver was pinned in the wreckage for about a half an hour. West Virginia authorities will perform an autopsy today on the body of 34-year-old Judy Komorowski of Conway in Beaver County. The woman's badly battered body was found in the back seat of her husband's station wagon in the parking lot of a nightclub near Weirton, West Virginia on Tuesday night. Allegheny County Coroner Dr. Cyril Wecht has agreed to turn over his morgue financial records to County Controller Jack Lynch. Wecht's attorney said yesterday the records will be given Lynch when the coroner returns from a short vacation about June 4th. The courts ordered the materials be handed over in Lynch's probe of private activities at the Allegheny County morgue. The fraud and conspiracy trial of former Allegheny County Manpower Director Robert Hawkins continues today in Erie, Pennsylvania. Yesterday, the prosecution opened the trial by charging that Hawkins defrauded Allegheny County of some $80,000 while he was ahead of that manpower agency. Sentences of from 8 to 23 months have been handed to former Aliquippa police officers who pleaded guilty yesterday to charges of theft by deception. The judge ruled 31-year-old David Trone and 34-year-old Reginald Foster can continue with their jobs and serve their jail terms at night and on weekends. House Republicans have succeeded in restoring most of the items that were proposed by Governor Thornburg in his new state budget. The items were cut by State Representative Richard McClatchy, who is chairman of the House Appropriations Committee. House Republicans also rejected a Democratic budget plan, which would have allowed temporary increases in the personal and corporate income taxes to revert to their old, lower rates. In sports, the Pirates dropped the rubber match of a 3-game set with the Expos last night, 3-0. The Pirates are off today and take on the New York Mets in a weekend series in New York starting tomorrow night. That's news and sports. Thanks for being with us. Now back to Eleanor.
Thanks, Tom. Well, if Harriet Friedlander tells me in my horoscope today to walk, don't drive, it's probably because I don't have any gasoline and the gasoline station is already closed. Harriet, let's see what you have for the rest of the folks.
May 24th, Aries. A choice you may make today could be very important later on. Choose wisely. Taurus. Try to see the other fellow side of the story now. Don't be stubborn. Gemini. Keep your mind on your work today and be prepared to handle unexpected changes. Cancer. Social matters can turn out differently than planned. Be ready to adapt to circumstances. Leo. A family member may see things more clearly than you do. Listen to reason. Virgo. An unexpected short trip can bring very good results now. Accept a good opportunity. Libra. Impulsive action on your part today could cause problems for others. Think before you act. Scorpio. Keep your temper under control now. Understand the situation before you become angry. Sagittarius. Try to maintain a practical outlook today. Avoid unusual ideas which may lose time. Capricorn. Some changes may need to be made in your schedule now. Do your best. Aquarius. Take advantage of a good opportunity today. Keep your personal progress in mind. Pisces. Remember something you may hear now. It could be more important than you realize.
Richard Valeriani, NBC's prize-winning diplomatic correspondent, has written a book. Its title, Travels with Henry. And since Mr. Valeriani was the only reporter to log more than 500,000 miles traveling with the former Secretary of State, he's more than qualified in writing this book. And Richard, it is a funny book, it's a human book, it really deals with the lighter side of what it was like traveling with Henry Kissinger.
Well, that's why I wrote it, to capture the fun of the travel. Kissinger himself is writing his memoirs. He's going to deal with the substance. And knowing Kissinger and his works, for example, as I say in the book, a British reviewer once said of Henry Kissinger, I don't know if he's a great writer, but I do know that if you can finish one of his books, you have to be a great reader. So that all of the funny stuff is going to get squeezed out of his memoirs, I'm sure. This book contains the kinds of stories that you told to your wife, your husband, your friends, your relatives when you came back from a trip. You were eager to, these were the Kissinger stories you dined out on. And they're not only about Kissinger, they're about the people he dealt with, Zhou Enlai, Golda Meir, and they're about the boys on the plane, the newsmen who traveled with him. I mean, even if you don't like Henry Kissinger, you can like the book.
Speaking of the boys on the plane, do you feel that Kissinger used the press?
I feel that every politician, every public official tries to use the press. Kissinger was a little more clever than others because he's more intelligent, he's witty, he's charming. As one of his secretaries said, he saves his charm for those who think he's charming. And so he did it a little more effectively, I think. But the press was always aware of that. And as one of my colleagues, Nick Daniloff of UPI, once wrote, there was no suspension of critical faculties when you traveled with Henry Kissinger. Or as one of the boys on the plane, Bernie Gwertzman of the New York Times, wrote, you don't become friends with the people you cover. I mean, if you're good and if you're professional, you keep your distance. Nobody ever called him, with one exception, a CBS reporter from the UN who didn't normally make the trips, made one trip and called him Henry. Otherwise, the reporter official relationship was always there, was always Mr. Secretary.
Wasn't there a funny incident about a news conference that he held at San Clemente when, was it not you that said,
right.
How do I refer to you, Mr. Kissinger or Dr. Kissinger?
At the end
his reply.
At the end of the news conference, I said, if you're confirmed by the Sun, would you prefer to be called Mr. Secretary or Dr. Secretary? He said, oh, I don't stand on protocol, just call me Excellency.
He actually used humor as a diplomatic tool, didn't he?
He used humor as a tool of diplomacy and also as a means of, I think, helping to soften the impact of some of his own foibles and his own flaws. I mean, he was a card-carrying megalomaniac, which everybody knew, but he joked about it. He used self-deprecating humor. For example, at one point he said, oh, I know I've been called a miracle worker. I know I've been called the indispensable man. He said, I know that because I remember every word that I ever wrote. So he took the edge off. Now, in diplomacy, he did the same thing, for example, with the Russians. They were pretty tough customers, and he didn't especially like the Russians. He liked the other leaders that he dealt with much better. But even there, what he would do, he would joke with Gromyko, for example. They'd be having a negotiating session on the treaty to limit strategic weapons. And Kissinger would, across the table, would look up and take a piece of paper, and he'd say something like this. He'd say, could you have that camera up there? He said, I need 2 copies of this right away. Could you have that camera up there? Get me 2 copies. And then Gromyko, surprisingly, would joke back and say, oh, no, he said, that camera was installed by Ivan the Terrible, and the lenses aren't good enough to pick up the copy on there. Or Kissinger would pixie look at the plant and say, Mr. Foreign Minister, is that where the microphone is? Should I speak right into there?
He was really irreverent in many ways.
He was irreverent, and he lightened the whole international scene with his humor. I mean, you don't see that anymore. It's completely gone. It did not exist before he got there, and it's disappeared when he left. Now, what did it do? Did it make the Russians change their position? Perhaps not. But what it did was it enabled both sides to cut through the ritual. Instead of coming in and doing that set piece where they sit down and make their propaganda and the United States feels compelled to reply in a ritualistic way, they would cut through all that by making jokes about it and therefore get down to business much more quickly and therefore make the negotiating process that much more efficient.
What you point out in the book that Henry Kissinger was truly the only survivor of the Nixon administration. What is he doing now? Do you keep in touch with him at all? Or
Not an awful lot. Well, he's down to his last 8 jobs. He is a colleague. I mean, he is on the payroll of NBC News. So periodically I interview him for NBC News, for the Today Show or Nightly News. To get his analysis of certain situations, what happens in Iran, what happened when Sadat went to Jerusalem, that sort of thing. He is writing he's finished volume 1 of his memoirs, The White House Years. He's going to be working on the secretarial years. That keeps him occupied. But he's also president of the North American Soccer League. He works for Chase Manhattan Bank. He is an advisor or consultant to Lehman Brothers and a couple of universities. I guess he still has some teaching responsibilities at Georgetown University in Washington, although I'm not sure whether or not that has expired. I think one of the reasons he kept so busy was to help him in the period of decompression. And here's a man with tremendous energy, a dynamic individual with a great deal of power, suddenly was out of office. How does he adjust to that? I think one way was to take on all these other responsibilities so that he would never have an idle moment. And I know he doesn't, because we're going to have a book party in Washington, a book signing celebration, and scheduling Kissinger was like scheduling President Carter. When the book was officially published May 11th, we're not going to get him until June 13th, if then.
Did he read the book?
Yes, he read the book, and the first thing he said was, "I will never speak to you again." No, he was just joking.
The accent. Do you think that Henry Kissinger really worked hard to retain that accent? He didn't. He certainly didn't work hard to lose it.
Well, he has a brother who speaks English without an accent, who came to this country at the same time, and his brother's name is Walter. Walter's explanation is, "I'm the brother who listened." No, I don't think it was deliberate. It's just when Kissinger went back to Germany after he had acquired some renown, enough so that he would be interviewed on German television, he watched the playback, and someone said that he spoke, or someone there said he spoke German with a Swedish accent. So he realized at that point there was no language in the world he spoke without some kind of accent.
How about the myth that Henry Kissinger was quite a ladies' man? Now let's go back. This is before he married Nancy. I mean, he became a sex symbol, and this actually is not a sexy-looking man.
But don't forget, during the first Nixon administration, remember who the sex symbols in Washington were? I mean, they were Wilbur Mills and Strom Thurmond. So it wasn't hard. Plus, that was self-styled. You know, a columnist for the Washington Post came up and asked Kissinger, underneath it all, "Dr. Kissinger, aren't you really a swinger?" And he said, "Oh, I guess you could call me a secret swinger." Well, that was good copy. And then he made the point that power is the ultimate aphrodisiac. So power does attract people. But he always made a point of cultivating that image, even as Secretary of State, even after he was married. When he went to Norway, he saw Liv Ullmann. When he was in Europe, he saw Elizabeth Taylor, said that she needed a briefing on the European Security Conference. When he went to Rome, he saw Gina Lollobrigida.
Oh, funny you bring up Gina Lollobrigida. I commented on the photograph of Richard Valeriani on the back cover, and it is a magnificent photograph, and there's sort of a, I don't know, the eye contact is beautiful. It looks like a studio photograph. Then when I looked in the back and it said, "Photo by Gina Lollobrigida."
That's quite true.
How did that happen?
Well, as I have explained before, Gina was doing a series on the 7 most exciting men in the world, under contract, and she just felt that I belonged.
You were number one, and this is not a studio portrait.
No, it was taken on Park Avenue in New York, and she was wearing a clinging pink knit dress, and listen to this, she was wearing a full-length pink mink coat when she took that picture.
Doesn't every photographer?
No, she's an old friend, and she was happy to do it, and I'm delighted she did, because I don't really look that good, but you're right, it's a marvelous picture.
It is a great photograph. In the time we have left, Richard, let's just talk briefly
Well, just want to make one point, though, about Kissinger. One line about the secret swinger, as I say in the book. If you believe Kissinger was a secret swinger, then you believe in Santa Claus and the Easter Bunny and the Tooth Fairy.
Okay, you've answered that question. The book is a sheer delight. I have thoroughly enjoyed it. It's not heavy reading. It's marvelous that it's being published now, because it is great summer reading. I highly recommend that everybody who has ever had one question about Henry Kissinger, or even about the press corps. I think there are lots of people that don't understand how hard you all work, and that's what I want to just talk to you very briefly about. A typical day, people don't understand. They see you on the nightly news. They see you doing a report that it's 1:30, 2:30, so on and so forth, and they say, "Oh, what a breeze, what an easy job." I mean, he goes out and does that. Days, sometimes weeks go into one of those reports.
We used to work 14, 16, 18 hours a day, because he worked 14 or 16 or 18 hours a day. And we had to start our day after he finished his to wrap it up. We had an additional problem in the Middle East because of the time difference, so that we would be sending satellite reports back at midnight or 1 o'clock to hit the 6 o'clock, 6:30 news here, and then have to drive, say, from Herzliya, where the studios were in Israel, to Jerusalem, another hour and a half away, and we get to sleep at 2:30 or 3 o'clock, and up and out on the road again at 7. So they were like military campaigns.
Didn't one correspondent fall asleep at one point? I think.
No, one of his aides did. And one of the trips to Paris, he was actually sitting there talking to the South Vietnamese, and in the middle of the briefing, he was doing the talking, was so tired that he I had fallen asleep in the act of typing. And actually just sort of typing and just leaning over and going to sleep.
And they said, well, you don't have to be here if you don't want to. Very quick, there's so much to talk to you about. The Salt Talks coming up. What do you think is going to happen? The health of Brezhnev. I mean, is he going to play a very important part?
He's going to play a very important part. I think there will be a serious debate in this country, and I think the Senate will ratify the treaty.
Okay, thank you. Richard Valeriani, Travels with Henry. It's a great book. Please read it. We'll be right back. Earlier this week, we chatted with Dr. Sheldon Cherry, and he was talking about the problems of adolescence and the emotional problems involved in this period of life. And he pointed out that these emotional problems are intensified if a young person is overweight. We have a guest in the studio this morning who is doing something marvelous to help youngsters who are overweight. Her name is Selma Ettenberg, and Selma is the director of Camp Shane for overweight children, and it's in Ferndale, New York. Selma, why did you decide to open a camp? I mean, did you have a personal motivation?
I had several motivations. First of all, I had grown up fat, and I had fought the battle of the bulge and still do, and I guess I will till the day I die, so that I always felt that this kind of camp could play a very important role for youngsters who want to watch their weight. I had been in camping for many years, but I had been in regular camp. And then I worked in a camp, an all-girls weight control camp, which I didn't like because, see, I happen to like camp. I think camp is great. And I didn't like it, and I didn't find it fun. I figured the kids didn't like it either. They didn't, incidentally. But the changes that took place were beautiful to behold. So I decided that I would open up my own weight control camp, but I made it the first co-ed weight control camp in the whole country. And my husband and I, I think we traveled must have been about 3,000 miles until we found a place that we liked. And I walked onto this campsite, and it used to be a small hotel. I was looking for something a little bit different because I felt that the average child who was on a diet needed more than just a raw bunk to sleep in, so that our bunks are finished, they have paneling, there's linoleum on the floor. It's a little more home-like. It's not quite as rustic as in a regular camp. I walked on the campsite, and it was so beautiful, I said to the real estate agent, this is the place I want, and I bought it.
So how much weight does the average child lose at your camp?
There are two averages, for boys and for girls. Boys are 41 pounds, girls 31 pounds. But even that answer is misleading because we have children who are young, 7, 8 years of age. That's Andrew Rondinelli. He was only 9 years old. Andrew lost 14 pounds. He was a little boy. Now look at the difference that the 14 pounds made in Andrew.
Do you ever keep track of the youngsters after they attend your camp? No, who's this?
Now, this boy is Stuart Sugarman. He's from Montreal. Stuart was with us 1 year, and this will answer your question, and lost quite a bit of weight, put it all back on again.
Look at the difference.
Now,
look at the difference in that young man.
63 pounds there. Now, what happened was, the following year, he called me and he said, Selma, I've destroyed myself. I put all my weight back in. Can I come up to camp early and do some physical work around the camp? Now, that shows 9 weeks of weight loss, 63 pounds. Stuart has kept all his weight off. We find that sometimes when a youngster is not successful the first year, he will be successful the second or the third year as it becomes important. And now, this girl is a beautiful child. She lost 27 pounds. Look how beautiful she is. A whole different change. Of course, this particular youngster was a very outgoing youngster, which is rather unusual.
Do you notice a personality change from the time they arrive in camp to when they leave?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. They are so totally different. They don't even look like the same child. Sometimes when I look at, now these pictures, she didn't get fat. This we've got them in reverse. When they come to camp, they're very shy, and as they start to lose weight, their self-concept starts to change. They look at themselves differently, and by the end of the summer, they're different people. This young man also lost in the 40s, and he worked out with weight, so you can see that his shoulders are still as broad, but he was so muscular when he left that it was like touching a board. Now, sometimes when we take these pictures, unless they're coded, I don't know the kids. Now, I know every kid in camp, and I don't recognize them.
Do you do a before and after picture of every camper?
Everyone. This young man is, comes from Philadelphia, and he was a camper with us the very first year he opened, and this year he's going to be our camp doctor.
Oh, isn't that a nice story?
Yes.
This is the only accredited co-ed camp for overweight children in the United States. So.
Well, we were the only accredited co-ed weight control camp, but what happened was other people got on the bandwagon. I really don't think they're co-ed. I think they're sister-brother camps. We are truly a co-ed camp where although they do not do their activities together, in other words, when they're going out to play softball and they're having instruction, the instruction is not co-ed. Primarily their evening activities are co-ed, and part of it, of course, is the fact that they start to socialize, which they've never done before.
What is the age span? How young, how old?
We take boys and girls from the age of 7 to 17, and girls from the age of 7 to 21, because we found there was a need for young teenagers who were off at college and who just had no self-control. And interestingly enough, there are more fat boys in this country than girls, but yet more girls want to go to camp and look thinner. It's more important to the females, and it should be more important to the males.
The length of the program?
7 weeks. And the tuition, which is $14.75, is income tax deductible.
It is? Why?
Because obesity is a medical problem.
It's the #1 medical problem in
Yes.
the country. And actually getting a youngster, say at 7 or 8, and changing their eating habits, which is what I am sure you are working on in that
Yes,
7-week period, it can actually save that child's life.
Exactly. As a matter of fact, very often I will speak to a mother who has a child, let's say 11, 12, and I'll say, when did your child start to get heavy? Oh, child was about 7 or 8, and the doctor said, it's baby fat, forget it. You don't forget it. Once you see your child has a stomach, you put that child, I don't like to use the word diet for a youngster, because if you're going to do it at home, don't call it a diet. Just say, let's watch what we're eating and go on a good nutrition program. I'm sure that this city, like every other city, has a good nutrition clinic, or a clinic that has a nutritionist in it. If the parent doesn't know how to handle it, go to the nutrition clinic. And for heaven's sake, the one thing we avoid assiduously is fad diets.
Okay, that's what I wanted to ask you. What kind of program do you use? Do you starve the kids?
Scarcely. We give them 3 meals a day, 3 well-rounded meals a day. We give them...
Any snacks between
yes,
meals?
Fresh fruit. They get fresh fruit every single day.
Does anybody ever sneak in a Twinkie or something like that?
Well,
do you have to watch?
In the beginning, they come in with some extra food, but if you get 8 or 9 kids in a bunk, and there's a couple of Twinkies around, they don't last too long. So they may go a day or two. There are no care packages, except for clothing, because the clothes they've got in camp no longer fit, and they need some additional clothes that they left home because they were too tight.
You have a lot of safety pins around, I would imagine.
No, we use suspenders. We put them on our clothing list. I think one of the funniest sights I've ever seen was, we had this boy who was a big boy, he was, as a matter of fact, he represented the United States in a decathlon, shot put, big boy. And he was wearing long undershorts, which I haven't seen in a long time. He was wearing shorts. And he was in camp, about 10 days. And he's walking down the hill and he's holding his pants like this and he's bouncing the ball. But in the meantime, his underpants were falling down around his knees. And he was very oblivious. The wind is blowing and there are the underpants. They just fell right down. And I thought, well, I think I'm going to add suspenders on my clothing list because that youngster could be very embarrassed.
So they have fun, don't they? You know, this is not an austere camp. I mean, there's really, it almost looks like the main chance for kids.
Right.
I mean, it's if we can just maybe get some tight shots of just a few of the pictures in this brochure. Look at the gorgeous swimming pool, the tennis courts.
It has solar heat. So that there's solar heat in the pool because the fat kid can't say it's too cold. We've taken away all excuses.
Up in this corner, exercise room.
And we've added a universal gym to that also.
Oh, horseback riding.
Yes. And there's indoor basketball, volleyball. We do jogging every morning. We generally manage to have enough musicians around to form our own band. We have overnights, we have cookouts. And
archery?
Archery, and we have arts and crafts. And what we do for our youngsters who are not from the New York area, I take them into New York on a trip. And we have good grooming for the older girls. And there's one of our special events, which is birthday ball. That's a rap session, and that's a weigh-in session. And then, you know, I take the youngsters not from the New York area into New York for the day, and I take them to Leone's for dinner to teach them that they can eat. But of course, I give them a whole tour of New York, the Statue of Liberty, the UN, and I have tickets for Annie this year.
Oh, Selma, this sounds marvelous. Camp Shane is in Ferndale, New York. How far is that from New York City?
About 100 miles.
Okay. If anyone is interested in getting some more information, getting a copy of this brochure, you could just maybe pick up the phone and call. The area code is 914. The number is 292-4644. Or I'm sure if someone would just send a note to Camp Shane, Ferndale, New York, that's not very hard to remember. You can get the brochure out to them. What you're doing is truly worthwhile. It is something that is, I'm sure, going to help change the lives. You're going to have, 20 years from now, an awful lot of middle-aged people coming back and giving you big kisses and hugs,
oh, yes.
I'm sure. Selma, thank you so much for being our guest this morning, and we'll be right back. Tomorrow, Lottie Falk, the president of the Pittsburgh Ballet, Miss Black Universe, and a contestant from the Three Rivers Piano Contest. So join us tomorrow morning, 11:30 to 12, right here on TV 53. Have a nice day, everyone.
This has been Good Day Pittsburgh with Eleanor Schano White and Tom Peterson with news. Join us each weekday morning at 11:30 for a special blend of features and interviews on Good Day Pittsburgh.